1857, the Mormon people had been in the Utah Territory for 10 years. President Buchanan, the President of the United States at the time, sent out people to Utah to help the Mormon people govern, to help Brigham Young, who was the governor of the territory at the time, help him run the territory. He sent out judges and surveyors. The judges and surveyors did not want to come west, and when they came west, they were a bit resentful. They didn't want to be here in the first place, and then they also didn't like the Mormon people. One particular judge, Judge Drummond, did not like the Mormon people. The Mormons didn't like him either, so the feeling was mutual. But he sent back rumors to President Buchanan that the Mormons with the Native Americans allying together were in rebellion, and they were going to overthrow the United States government in Utah, which was not true. But President Buchanan was not going to have that happen on his watch. So he had an army already in Kansas, a standing army, and he sent those people into the Utah Territory to squash the rebellion that the Mormon people were not in. But Brigham Young said he was going to stand and fight. They were tired of being kicked out of so many places. They were going to stand and fight for their lives and their families and their freedoms in the Utah Territory. So Brigham Young sent as many people into Provo and as south as they could to get them out of the Salt Lake Valley and out of the fighting. But he had 5,000 men that would stand and fight with him, and so they stayed in Salt Lake Valley to help fight off the army that supposedly was coming to hurt them, which they were supposed to go and hurt them, and that's what they were worried about. So they did stay there because they were going to stand and fight. Now, at the same time, he also claimed martial law. Martial law meant that Brigham Young claimed martial law, and he wanted all of his people in the territory not to trade with anyone, because if they were going to war, they would need all the supplies they could get. So they were supposed to get all of their supplies together and keep them. They were not to trade with anyone. At the same time, you had pioneers that were still moving to California, still moving to Oregon. And there was a group of people, the Baker Fancher Party, who came through Utah trying to get to California. And in 1857, in September, they stopped and camped in this valley. They had stopped in Cedar City first and Parowan, and they tried to get people to trade with them, but they wouldn't. And so the Baker Fancher Party was very upset. They were from Arkansas, and they said that they started all of these rumors, and they said that they would bring an army from California also to kill the Mormons as well. They also said that they were the ones who were involved at Haun's Mill, which is a major massacre of the Mormon people. And they also claimed that we are the ones who killed your beloved Joseph Smith, which that was not true. They were not those people at all. However, the Mormon people that were here, they are the ones who experienced all of those things. They had experienced Haun's Mill. They had also experienced the death of their prophet Joseph Smith, who was murdered in Carthage jail by mobs, and they knew Joseph. A lot of them knew him, and so it wasn't that far, not that long ago, that they had experienced these things. They had also experienced a lot of threats by people, and those people had made good on those threats. And so to the Mormon people, they took those threats very seriously. Now, to the Arkansas people, they probably wouldn't necessarily have come back with an army from California. We don't know that for sure, but it's fairly unlikely. Also, we tend to say things when we are hangry. When we are angry and we're hungry, we tend to say those things. And they were desperate for supplies. If they didn't get these new supplies, they would have had a very, very hard time making it to California. And so you have this conflict. You also have the Paiute people who are involved. The Paiute people see this group coming through, and they are worried about them too. They don't want them in their valley. And so there are some Indian attacks. But the Indian attacks specifically come from John D. Lee, who was a part of the Mormon militia. He was instructed by his local church leaders in Parowan, the stake president and the high council, to rally the Paiute people to help fight with them. And so that's where the Indian attacks come from. Now, the people in Parowan, the Mormons in Parowan and Cedar City, they come up with a plan to get rid of these immigrants. And they send a writer up to Brigham Young to ask him about the plan and see if it's okay. The thing is they do not wait for his reply. They decide to go after the immigrant people. And what they do with the Paiutes as well, in tow with them, the Baker Fancher Party had been being attacked by the Paiutes and by Mormon militiamen as well. But They come in with a flag of truce. The Mormon militia comes in with a flag of truce. Specifically, John D. Lee comes in with a flag of truce into their camp and says, we can escort you out and protect you from the Native American people if you lay down your weapons. That's what we'll do for you. And they agreed. The Baker Fancher Party, these immigrants didn't want to agree, but they were running out of water, they were running out of food because they couldn't actually get out of their camp because of the attacks, and they needed to move on to California. And so they agreed with what was going on with John D. Lee and what he was said that the Mormons would help them do. And they said that they would get them out of the valley and protect them. So they didn't have any weapons. The Mormon men, the militia, they escorted them out of the valley side by side. And with the immigrants next to them with no weapons, the Mormon militia had guns. And they were given a signal. And once they were given a signal, it was, halt, men, do your duty. In this valley, they were to turn to the immigrant and shoot them point blank. If they could not bring themselves to shoot them, they would shoot their gun in the air. And then someone would shoot for them. Now, in this valley, you have 120 people who died. The women and children were in the wagons ahead. The Paiutes were told to take care of them. Now, the children who couldn't talk, the really little ones, they were spared and they were adopted out to local families. And they were also taken to Fort Harmony. Some of them were housed in Fort Harmony as well. There were 17 of them until they could get them back to relatives in Arkansas. But 120 people in this valley were massacred, killed. Now, this is a dark part of Utah history. It's a dark part of LDS history as well. And oftentimes we don't like to talk about it. Different groups don't like to talk about it because it does put a black mark on their people and on their history and on just Utah history in U.S. history. It's a horrible thing to have happened. But understanding 2 points of view. The Baker Fancher Party needed to get to California and they were desperate, and so they said things that probably weren't necessarily true. But then you also have on the flip side the Mormon people. They had experienced threats, people had carried out those threats on them, and they had experienced those things, and they were not going to have that happen again. Now, does that justify them doing something like this? Of course it doesn't. But there's always multiple sides to a story. The writer that they sent up to Brigham Young to ask about this plan, he came back the next day, and Brigham Young had written back to them and said, do not worry about the immigrants, let them go, do not do anything to them. And after that happened, it was almost like they had the Mormon people had kind of come out of a trance almost, not necessarily a trance, but they had recognized what they had done and that it was this horrible thing that they had done. It wasn't until 20 years later that justice was served for all of these people that had laid dead in this valley. In 1877, John D. Lee, who was the one who was asked to carry out this plan, not the only one who carried out the plan, because there were multiple people involved in this, but he was the one who was killed for it. He was the one who justice was brought down for these people in this valley that were killed in this valley on him. He is the only one who was executed for carrying out this massacre, even though, again, he was not the only person to do that. He was brought out here to Mountain Meadows and he was shot into his grave, into his coffin, and then I believe he's buried in Panguitch, Utah. But he is the only person that was blamed, really, for this at all, even though there were a lot of people. So it's a very, very dark part of our history. Doesn't justify, as I said, the reasons why they did it doesn't justify it, especially since they were unarmed. It wasn't even a fair fight. They were not armed. But there is different monuments in this valley. It is a gorgeous place. It's pretty windy out here today. But in 1999, the LDS Church officially dedicated a monument. And it's kind of up here a little ways. They dedicated a monument in 1999, and they apologized for what happened to the people, to the immigrants, and what their church and the people in their church had done to these people. So let's see. You can see that back behind me, the monument back behind me with the flag, and the flag from Arkansas. It is a pretty neat place out here. It's very hollowed ground, and they have a nice little path. You can kind of see that path behind me. You can go and walk around the field around this hollowed ground out here. That is the Mountain Meadows Massacre. 120 people were massacred because of misunderstandings and people's anger and wanting revenge. And it's a horrible mark on our history, but it's one that needs to be recognized and remembered.